Well, it is Friday and it is October the 8th, 2021. It's hard to believe that 2021, with all of its chaos, confusion, is nearly over, and we will enter into a new year, the Lord willing. My, uh, my dear mother um began to develop emotional and mental uh, challenges, problems in her life. I don't believe she was ever diagnosed with a quote unquote disorder. She just went to medical doctors who would prescribe to her what would be known back then as uppers and downers. Um, because of her difficulty with the accident to her hands, and then with the difficulty with being a woman unsubmissive to her husband and spending money as if he had a printing press in the basement. My dad had to resort to two jobs, if not three. I can remember him working three jobs because his wife was out of control when it came down to spending. And this only complicated the problems that I witnessed in my early life. When I got married, even though I had a whole 20 minutes of premarital counseling with Dr. Warren Wiersbe, who married us, I was ill prepared to go ahead and be a husband. Uh, it was a tremendous challenge for me. My wife, on the other hand, had a mom and dad who were together and raised their family. But I did not have that luxury. God said, I'm going to raise you in a unconventional way. And he did. Now, dad began to work three jobs. As I mentioned earlier, at my birth, he worked for the railroad. He later became an insurance adjuster during the day, working at Chubb and Sons, downtown Chicago. From there, he went to a what we call today telephone solicitor job, where he would call people up. I never knew any of the details. I just knew that when a father was expected to be home by 6 o'clock from working downtown, dad was not. He was off to his second job. And from there, he usually wound up coming home maybe 10 or 11 o'clock. Although I never saw him come home, he slept for a couple of hours and then got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he threw newspapers. He distributed the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times to the high rises on Lakeshore Drive. And so he didn't get a lot of sleep, and he was somewhat of a small stature man, probably about the same stature as his wife. And he did this for a very long time. Now, what would happen is when he did have some time off, he was exhausted. I can remember specifically one Saturday afternoon that he laid down. We lived in an apartment complex up on the third floor. We never did own a house. We always lived in apartments. And this was on Montana Street in Chicago, a couple of blocks away from Senn, Senn high school in Chicago, and he was exhausted. He laid down on the bed, and he had fallen in a pretty deep sleep, and he was snoring. And my mother, being frustrated because she wanted to talk and he was exhausted, poured water down his open mouth into his throat. And the next thing I heard was him gurgling and spitting and coughing and choking. And then a verbal fight ensued between the two of them. As he had to work all of these jobs because he could not control his wife, in the sense of he was not a spiritual leader in the home, and she was not a spiritual woman in the home. In fact, I don't remember in my childhood we going to church as a family. Grandma Lyle would take me to church. But the frustration in my mom's life grew. And usually on Friday, when my dad came home, he only had the one job to do with the newspaper. He came home on Friday, and I can remember standing on the back porch or standing in the kitchen area, and we had a wooden back porch. And they were fighting inside, arguing, "You're never home, we can never talk," and all of the other different pent up emotions that my mother had. I don't really remember my dad responding. And illusion that passive man. And so they would argue, they would fight. Get out of here. And as a little boy, I witnessed this. And Dad started to leave on Friday nights on a regular basis and not return home until Monday after his jobs. And this was a common thing. And I specifically remember voicing, "I want to go with Dad." Staying at home with Mom after Dad left was not a pleasant experience. And so I mentioned, "I want to go with Dad." And she said, "Fine, go pack your suitcase." And I remember having this little suitcase, and I put some stuff in it, and I was pretty semi-proud, I guess. And I started walking towards the back door and going out onto the porch where my dad was. And all of a sudden, my mom yelled at me, "Get back in here. You're not going anywhere." And so it was. Weekend after weekend, on Friday, there was a fight. There was an argument. Get out. And Dad would leave. I don't know where he went. I suspected that maybe he checked into a hotel, maybe downtown close to work. I'm not quite sure. I don't think he was staying with anybody. And that's the way it went for years in my adolescent life. But there came a point, I specifically remember sitting on the water radiators that had little metal covers on it. I could look out the window on Montana Street. And I looked towards the corner from where my dad would get off on Irving Park Road and walk over one block and then start walking down the block towards the apartment building. I can remember oftentimes sitting there and I would see him. And that Monday, I did not see him. He did not come home. Tuesday, after school, I sat up on that thing and I looked down the street and he did not come home. And Wednesday, he did not come home. And Thursday, he did not come home. He never returned to his wife or to his family, to his children. And from there, the disintegration continued to spread like wildfire in my mom's mind and in her emotions. However, I was not alone. I never really felt like I was alone. I didn't have a supportive mother. In fact, she was abusive. My brother and sister were off doing their things as far as going to high school and not failing and not dropping out of class and graduating, etc. And I was going to school, and I had my own challenges that I'll share the next time we get together about that. But I never felt alone. And I attribute that as a young boy to that commitment I made when I was about 7 or 8. And God's promise to me, lo, I am with you. I will never leave or forsake you. And sometimes I did not always remember that. But it's good for you and I to reflect on our lives and see how our Creator God stepped into our world, lived in our world to develop us and to prepare us for a ministry and the good works He's ordained for us to do. We'll catch you next time.